Hello, everyone. Welcome. Let me know that you can hear me okay, see everything okay. It's all good. I am here to talk to you today about something you might have heard about or seen when researching paperwork packets, counseling intake forms, things like that. And that is this phrase, attorney approved. So if you have ever seen an advertisement for an attorney approved paperwork packet, that's what we're talking about today, because that claim just might be too good to be true. And actually, spoiler alert, it is. So if you don't know who I am, hi, I am Dr. Maelisa McCaffrey, founder of QA Prep and author of this book over here, Stress-Free Documentation for Mental Health Therapists. And today we are going to talk about attorney approved paperwork packets. Why are people saying that they are attorney approved? What does that mean? And essentially why it's wrong. So let's look at this term. What does this mean for someone to have a paperwork packet that is attorney approved? By the way, if you are here live, feel free to go ahead and pop in the chat any questions, comments, etc. that you have. We will have time for a little Q&A. And if you are watching the recording, you are always welcome to do that by typing in the comments. All right. Okay. So why is the term attorney approved problematic? Well, essentially, that means that, if I am looking at two paperwork packets that I want to purchase, and one just says it's a paperwork packet and one says it is attorney approved, my natural thought is, well, let me go with the attorney approved one, right? Because then it probably is covering all the legal things that I needed to cover. The problem is that there is a lot of complexity when it comes to paperwork. And essentially, we have psychologists, we have licensed mental health counselors, we have licensed professional counselors, we have social workers, we have marriage and family therapists. There might be other licenses that you might have that I am not aware of. That is just in the United States, at least 5 different types of licenses that can occur. Sometimes all of those within the same state. Or often, most of the time, at least 4 of those are all represented within one state. So what does that mean? That means that we all have different licensing requirements. We all have different ethics guidelines. And then on top of that, we all live in different states, and each state has different state laws. So when you are creating any of your documentation, especially your intake paperwork, your paperwork packet, and what I say, what I mean by that is typically the things that you want clients to sign and or the things that you are legally required to have clients sign or just to review with clients at the outset of therapy. Not even getting into the other documentation requirements, because each state has different laws related to progress notes, related to treatment plans, or they may not really care a whole lot about it, right? It depends on the state. But when we talk about things like informed consent, pretty much every state has a law around what it is that you need to review with people at the outset of therapy. And most states do have a law around what needs to be documented in general. Now, the crazy thing is, I just mentioned we have 5 license types. Typically 4 of those are represented in every single state. We have 50 states. Okay, this is just in the US. And so that is like a couple hundred combinations potentially of what might be applying to you and what it is that you need to review with people in your paperwork packet. Because yes, sometimes a state will have different laws for me as a psychologist than it will have for a social worker or an MFT. A lot of times psychologists are kind of separated from other license types, but some states are specific about spelling those out for each license type. And some states aren't as specific about that, and they just talk about therapy or mental health services in general. But beyond that, as a psychologist, I actually do have a few different ethics guidelines than MFTs, and social workers have a few different ethics guidelines than licensed professional counselors. And so all of those things have to be considered when you are creating your paperwork for your private practice. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to consider. What does that mean? That means there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all paperwork packet, and there is especially no such thing as an attorney-approved paperwork packet. Now, you could have a paperwork packet that was reviewed by an attorney. And so you could say attorney reviewed paperwork packet, and that's great. Sure, why not? And that attorney, I have not yet met an attorney that would feel comfortable saying that they can definitively say, yes, what I am approving here meets the criteria for every single license type in every single state. It would be a full-time job just to do that research, right? On all the states, on all the different license types, and make sure that every single component is captured in that intake packet. And then they would need to update it, because guess what? Different states update laws. Like a couple years ago, California updated a law around telehealth documentation and what needs to be in progress notes specifically. That was California specific. But then there are also broader laws that change, like in the US, we had good faith estimates were required also a couple years ago now. And so there's just too many things that are moving pieces that if an attorney is going to put their stamp of approval on something and say, yes, this meets all the legal requirements, which is really the point of having an attorney review something, there's just no way they can do it. It's impossible. So that means that attorney approved, it's really not accurate. It's just not. It's not accurate for you. It might be accurate for the person who had an attorney approve their paperwork packet for their particular license type in their state at the time they did it. Beyond that, you really cannot guarantee anything. So yes, I am saying, if someone says their paperwork packet is attorney approved, they're doing it as a selling point. And so yes, they might have had an attorney approve it. It means nothing about whether or not that applies to you or helps you meet all the criteria that you need to meet. So I am putting that out there to let you know that. And it's one of those things where when you think about it, you hear me say it, it makes sense, right? You're like, yeah, of course. How could that happen? Now, how big a deal is this, right? So I think I lay that out, almost anybody would agree. And you might say, well, okay, but how different are these requirements, right? And like, is it that big a deal? Does it really matter to me? And the thing is, I don't know. It may or may not, right? So I have a whole packet of forms that are included, in the book, Stress-Free Documentation, and that you get access to with that book. And so I have had to do this, right? I've had to create forms, update them, keep them updated. And I have looked at all of the different criteria for different license types and all of the ethics guidance, as well as many state laws. I have not looked at every single state law around documentation for all the different license types, because again, I actually already have plenty of work to do, and that would take so much time and effort. What I can do, and what pretty much everyone else is doing with their paperwork packets, right, is I can deduce what is most likely necessary in your paperwork packet, and I can outline all of those things. So my paperwork packet does have some extra things in it that you might not need. For example, there is, a place to sign the consent form. Not every state actually requires that every license type has people physically sign, or digitally sign their consent form. Some states say that verbal consent is just fine. Most of our ethics guidelines just say we have to give consent and maybe document proof of consent. But I can't remember, I don't think any of the ethics guidelines specifically say you have to have clients sign a form, but they do often say that you need to document getting that consent, right? So that's one example of kind of a nuanced thing that, as someone who created a paperwork packet, I'm considering. So I'm trying to capture what are the most stringent requirements, because if I put a signature line in my consent form, 90% of therapists are having their clients sign their consent forms. So it's one of those things that even if you don't technically need to have your clients do it, it can still be a good practice. And if you already need to document it, that's an easy way to document reviewing it with people, right? So I do that. But I do clearly say, I can't guarantee that this paperwork packet is going to meet the criteria for every single therapist out there, even within the United States. And I especially can't say that for other countries, right? So what I can do, though, and what a lot of other people are doing when they create paperwork packets, is I can try to gather up all of that information, put it all in there. And then one thing that has been really important to me from the very beginning, so I've had my paperwork packet available, I think maybe since 2016, and just redid everything when I wrote the book over the summer. One thing that I do is really try to highlight what are the things that as a clinician you might need to change. And when I do that, I am actually looking beyond the attorney approved stuff, because there's more to your paperwork than what is legalese, right? Than what legally needs to be there. And there's even more than what ethically needs to be there. It's really about what makes sense for you and your clients. So I did a live just a couple weeks ago, I think less than a couple weeks ago, about having culturally inclusive paperwork. So are you considering all the things that would be important to your clients in your paperwork? And while that applies a lot to the paperwork that clients are filling out, so like your intake assessment forms, it does also apply to your informed consent. Because with informed consent, you want that to be an understandable form. And when you think about these intake forms, this is really your client's first experience with you. It's their first touch point. And you want that to express not only how you work, meaning you don't want it to sound like an attorney. You want it to sound like you. You want it to be, yes, legally helpful, cover all the ethics topics, and you want it to be something that helps your clients know that they are seen and that what is important to them is captured. So as an example, that's why I really focus on, for example, insurance stuff. Whether or not you take insurance, it's really important to convey that to clients. And it's really important to convey to clients their options when it comes to insurance, right? If you have people who work in different fields, they often will be a little bit more wary about having their documentation reviewed or about just having, mental health services in general. So this is a point of time where you can, right off the bat, immediately upon meeting with them and immediately upon giving them paperwork, say, I get that this is a concern for you, and you can highlight the especially the confidentiality aspects that relate to the type of people you see. For example, if you work with parents and kids, or especially if you work with kids, there are different things you're conveying in that paperwork than if you just work with adults. And if you work with people who, work for the federal government or people in the military, police officers, these are people who often are concerned that their mental health records could literally impact their income and their work and their livelihood and often their identity. And so it's very important for them, and they appreciate having that information up front. I still think you need to talk with people about this stuff, but having all of that, anything that's important for you to talk with people about, as soon as possible in that first session, anything that would be included in that umbrella of informed consent really should be in your paperwork packet that you review with clients. So Yeah, so that is why it's really important. And that's why, as part of my paperwork, I try to include all of that stuff, but then I really also highlight where you might need to change things. So I'll highlight, for example, like, here are two possible sections on insurance billing, for example, or on working with insurance. So if you don't contract with insurance, here's an option. If you do contract with insurance, here's an option. I'll also highlight different things where you might want to update your cancellation policy or your no-show policy, different things like that. Things that often you might not consider, and especially wouldn't think about the level of detail that you might actually need to explain it until you start doing this thing of either revising your forms or creating your paperwork packet. So that is my goal, is that I've done as much research as I can outside of knowing you and your specific state's laws and under your specific license type. I've gathered as much information as possible that would likely apply to you. And then I also walk you through, hey, here's this thing, you probably want to change this thing. Here's this thing, you want to change this. Beyond that, obviously you could change the entire form if you wanted to, but then why are you buying a paperwork packet, right? So that is why I think it's important to explain from the perspective of someone who's creating one of these paperwork packets, what we can include and guide you on and what can be there. But also, I really just want everyone to know that if you hear the phrase attorney approved, it's a myth. It's, I'm not saying that people are being malicious when they're saying that, but there is no way that attorney approval can apply to you right now in your specific situation. It is just nearly impossible. So instead, what you want to focus on is, what are your ethics guidelines? What's really important to talk with people about, especially at the outset of therapy? What are the types of things that, and if you're kind of wondering about what potentially could be important there, think about like what is likely to cause some type of disruption or some type of disruption in the therapeutic relationship. What might create that? And often it is things around informed consent. So that's why when I talk about paperwork packet, we can get into like nitty gritty about, do I need a signed consent form for this or a separate form for that? That's a little easier to look up because those usually are legal things. But what's most important is looking at what is it that my clients need to know, what's important to them, and what are potential issues that I might have with my clients based on the type of people I see, based on the type of experiences they have, and based on the way in which I work. And those are the things you want to highlight, and you want to do that in language that you can all understand. So that's another thing, is that my forms, they do sound professional and use some legal terms, but really they're meant to be used and read and understood by an average person so that someone doesn't feel like they don't know what they're signing. You absolutely don't want people to experience that at the start of therapy. So let me look at my notes here. I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover. But that's what's really important to me, is that if you are looking for a paperwork packet, be critical about how they're advertising it, what they're promising you, and about how much you can change. You do want to know what forms you're getting and all of that. Oftentimes people will let you piecemeal that kind of stuff. Since I just have it in my book, it's kind of all there. And so you can check it all out there. But know what you're getting and look at the type of promises that they're giving you, because the one takeaway from this whole video is you will have to change whatever paperwork packet you purchase or get for free, or even inherit from like a licensed supervisor that was your supervisor. You will have to change something in those forms. And so, set yourself up for success, and also manage your expectations. Know that you will need to review it, and you'll have to review it ongoing too. Guess what? Stuff changes. So, laws change, your requirements change, your needs change, your clients' needs change. So it's always something that you'll have to review over time. And no one can guarantee that this packet is going to work for you forever. And that's okay. That's a good thing. And there's still resources to make it really easy for you. So, okay, if it's been a while since you have reviewed your own paperwork packet, do that. Schedule it in your calendar right now. And if you are looking for forms, I have them all in my book here, Stress-Free Documentation for Mental Health Therapists. And I give you guidance on how to change them and what you likely need to change or what you might want to consider changing. But I do give you a cancellation policy. And if you just want to adopt that and you like it, cool, try it out and that works for you. All right, I don't see any questions here, no comments today, which is totally fine. I came on a little late and that might be why. But if we don't have any questions, then we will wrap things up here. So feel free to check out the book. If you like having something written down, we also have a blog post on this very topic. So we'll connect this video to that blog post and vice versa. Thank you all for being here, everyone who was live. And, check out those paperwork packets, but beware of attorney approved because it's a myth. All right. Until next week, happy writing, everyone.